Chair now, Chair now recognizes Ms. Ocasio-Cortez from New York for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Thank you so much, Chairman. I appreciate it, and thank you to all of our witnesses for sharing your expertise today. Dr. Snyder, your opening was, I think, very illuminating as to the connections here between different geopolitical theaters and how we can make sure that we continue to defend democracy, both domestically in the United States, but also globally. I wanted to touch a little bit briefly on, and pick up a little bit, very briefly, on your exchange with Representative Khanna here in what you assessed as a mistake in tying Ukraine to the conflict in Gaza. And also presently, as you mentioned, the necessity of passing aid to Ukraine as quickly as possible. Could you speak a little bit, expand a little bit more on where you see that entanglement or detriment in tying the conflict in Ukraine with what is happening in Gaza and with the Netanyahu's government's decisions to advance in Gaza, and how the U.S. relates to both of those things differently?
Happy to do my best. With respect to the general premise, I just want to emphasize the general premise of your question. These things are all connected. If you're a Chinese political warrior and you're concerned with public opinion, law, and psychology, you're not going to respect the safe spaces of the country that you're trying to weaken. So we might say, I don't want to talk about Ukraine and Chinese political warfare at the same time, but there are no Chinese political warriors who are doing that.
Correct.
We might say, we don't want to talk about Trump because that's too sensitive, but you can precisely not expect Chinese political warriors to respect your safe spaces. It's precisely your safe spaces, your tender spots, that they're going to go after. And this is not just a speculation by me, it's the actual record of what actual Chinese propaganda does. It goes after the safe spaces that you want yourself not to talk about. On the issue of Gaza and Ukraine, I'll be as specific as I can. As I read it in late 2023, in a different political context than the one we're in now, and in a different stage of the war in Gaza than the one we're in now, the Biden administration made a political calculation that bringing Israel and Ukraine together would be the most likely way to get people from both sides of the aisle to vote for a substantial bill. I believe that was the reason at the time. I was not party to those considerations. However, months later, with two other things having happened, the first being that the war in Israel has gone through several stages in the meantime, and our having gotten past any place where the Israeli military response is going to lead to a political solution. And secondly, the extreme difficulty in getting Ukraine aid to pass in any form. Those two things change the overall political situation. For me, who's not in the legislature and not in the executive branch, what I see is the qualitative difference between the two events. That Russia invading Ukraine objectively aids the Chinese position in profound ways, which their political warriors try to exploit. But it also threatens world order in ways that are essential to the United States and to its European partners. Whereas the conflict in Gaza is a horrifying terrorist operation, which must lead to some kind of political solution. It won't be solved militarily. That's my assessment.
Thank you so much, Dr. Snyder. And I think what you laid out so clearly there and in your opening as well is that the core and the key that we have here is in support, geopolitically, instability, is in supporting Ukraine in this moment. Having U.S. military assistance and broader global assistance to Ukraine should be one of our top geopolitical priorities, because it is the key in defending democracy geopolitically, whether your interest is in China, whether the interest is in anywhere else there. All of the focus here is in Ukraine and in supporting and ensuring that Putin and an authoritarian regime in Russia does not prevail in changing the geopolitical order, rule of law, and functioning democracy worldwide. And frankly, I think it's important from my vantage point, on the second point, is that anything that impedes the swiftness and the urgency of our ability to get that support to Ukraine is overall contributing to the volatility of our situation. Would you say that that's a fair assessment?
All of the hostile and Russia and Chinese observers and political warriors want this to drag out as long as possible and praise those who make it drag out. So of course my answer would be in the affirmative. The front in Ukraine is threatened in ways it doesn't have to be. The population is threatened in ways it doesn't have to be. This is a relatively easy war for us to influence in the correct way. It matters to us for all the reasons that you've given, and we ought to do so as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Snyder.